Greetings, Thrillseekers. I am the Master Programmer, curator of hidden knowledge and eerie tales. Today, I bring you 3 haunting stories unearthed by Rasputin. These tales reveal towns that slipped into shadow, faded from existence, or transformed into ghostly echoes, leaving behind mysteries unsolved. So, if you're looking for a fright, something scary to watch at night, stay with us as we delve into these 3 extraordinary tales. First, in Havenbrook, the town that slipped away, the DSA investigates a town that flickers between dimensions. Only faint shadows and ghostly figures remain, reliving their last moments over and over. Can the team anchor it back to reality, or is Havenbrook lost forever? Next, in the Silent Bells of Ashwood, a gothic church sits in the heart of a quiet town. When the church bells start to ring at strange hours, fear spreads through Ashwood, and soon the town falls silent. What curse lies within the walls of Ashwood's silent church? Finally, in the black fog of Briar's Ridge, a mysterious fog rolls into a small mining town. It moves with purpose, swallowing people and spreading shadow across empty streets. As the townfolk vanish, the fog takes on a life of its own, echoing with lost voices. Will anyone survive the black fog? These stories are not for the faint of heart, so sit back, turn down the lights, and prepare to be haunted by the abandoned towns Rasputin has uncovered. And if you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our channel for more chilling stories and dark discoveries. Welcome to another journey into the unknown, brought to you by the.darkfiles. The DSA first received reports of Havenbrook through a series of urgent, garbled police radio transmissions. An officer named Mitchell had called for backup, but his signal kept breaking, distorting into static. Then he said something strange.
They're not gone. They're here. Just faded.
The radio went dead moments later, and when the state police arrived at the scene, Havenbrook wasn't there. Where the town once stood was nothing but open fields and wild grass, swaying under an overcast sky. Havenbrook had simply disappeared. The DSA, alerted by the usual reports, dispatched Agent Klein, a veteran with experience in dimensional anomalies, along with a small team. Upon arrival, they found themselves standing on the old road to Havenbrook. According to records, it should have led straight into town, but instead, the road ended abruptly. There were no buildings, no streets, no signs of life, only an empty landscape. As they began to survey the area, Klein noticed something odd. In the distance, there was a faint shimmer, like heat waves rising from pavement. He ordered the team to move in closer, scanning for any readings of dimensional irregularities. As they neared the shimmer, they could see it was an outline, vague shapes of buildings, barely visible, like images imprinted on thin fog. It was Havenbrook, or rather, a version of it, flickering in and out of existence. They set up a perimeter and began their analysis. Readings were inconclusive, but Agent Klein noticed something chilling. In the mirage of a town, shadowy figures moved, going about their lives as if nothing were wrong. They looked like residents, ordinary people, some sitting on benches, others walking across what should have been the town square. But none of them acknowledged the DSA team. It was like watching echoes of a memory, repeating itself endlessly. Then they heard a child's voice, soft, barely more than a whisper, but unmistakably human.
Help us.
It called. Klein immediately directed his team to locate the source. As they approached the hazy figure of what looked like a school, the outline flickered, solidifying briefly. they could make out faint shapes through what should have been walls. A woman holding a child's hand, faces etched in terror, frozen in time. Klein ordered a probe into what he called a temporal echo phenomena. One of the agents threw a beacon through the shimmer, but as it hit the boundary, it disintegrated, leaving only a faint blue spark before vanishing. It was as if Havenbrook's ghostly outline existed in a different frequency, vibrating out of sync with reality itself. As they continued their investigation, something strange happened. Agent Klein's radio crackled to life, emitting distorted voices, townfolks who hadn't been heard in weeks. It sounded like live conversation, but their voices were overlapping, looping in fragments, as if trying to break through from somewhere else. One voice stood out above the rest, a young girl, her tone panicked.
Please, someone, we're fading. Can anyone hear me?
The team scrambled to locate the origin of the signal, which led them to the exact center of the vanished town. There, a manhole cover stood out, solid and real amid the faint mirage. It seemed untouched by whatever had shifted the rest of Havenbrook out of reality. Agent Klein ordered the cover lifted, and they found the entrance to an underground bunker. Inside, there were signs that someone had been there recently. Clothes, food, even a radio broadcasting static. One of the team members realized something. The bunker wasn't from Havenbrook at all. Its construction was decades old, but its design didn't match any known architectural plans. It looked like it belonged to a different era completely, perhaps even a different reality. As they explored further, they found a series of journals, scribbled frantically in the margins. The entries described Havenbrook as a place locked between worlds, a town existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, slowly losing its grip on each one. The writer warned that once the town lost its anchors, it would slip permanently into a state of non-existence, taking everything in its vicinity along with it. Suddenly, a loud groan echoed from above, shaking the bunker walls. The faint mirage of Havenbrook outside began to flicker violently, shifting between states, vanishing and reappearing, as if struggling to stay connected. Shadows of residents appeared closer, their expressions frozen in fear, reaching out towards the DSA team in eerie silence. They knew they were running out of time. Realizing the danger, Agent Klein decided to activate the DSA's experimental temporal stabilizer, a device meant to anchor entities to one specific point in time and space. As the device powered up, the groaning faded, and for a split second, Havenbrook solidified. The figures became clear, expressions horrified yet relieved. But the stabilizer couldn't hold. The strain was too great, and the town began to flicker once more, breaking apart like scattered ash. As the town started to vanish for the final time, Klein could hear the screams of the residents as they shifted in and out of reality. Then, silence. The outline of Havenbrook faded, leaving only an empty field, as if nothing had ever been there. In their final report, the DSA classified Havenbrook as a dimensional slip event, a phenomenon where entire regions lose their spatial and temporal anchor points. The report was sealed, and Havenbrook was erased from maps and records, its name forbidden to speak in official documentation. But if you stand in that empty field on a quiet night, some say you can hear the faint whispers carried by the wind. Echoes of a town that slipped between worlds, forever calling out from the silence. Ashwood had always been a quiet place, a small town nestled in a valley between vast stretches of forest and open plain. At its heart stood a tall, Gothic church with a set of ancient bronze bells that rang every morning and evening without fail, calling the faithful to service. People said the bells were enchanted, gifted to the town by a monk who blessed them against misfortune, but few believed the old legends anymore. The trouble began when the bells started ringing at strange times. Midnight, midday, dawn, dusk. No one could explain it, but no one took it as a warning. Then, one fall morning, a loud, metallic groan echoed through the valley, like the sound of something massive being forced open. Residents thought it was just a strange mountain echo or a shift in the earth, but soon after, people began falling ill. It started with dizziness, fainting spells, and a pervasive sense of dread that blanketed the town. No one could say exactly why, but the event felt like a pull, like something was watching, lurking just out of sight. Even the children went silent, avoiding the church, whispering about shadows on the steeple. One evening, the bells rang out again, but this time, the sound was warped, as if coming from deep underground. That night, the townsfolk heard strange noises, a low, rhythmic thumping that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. People boarded up their windows, praying for dawn, but morning brought no relief, only an unnatural silence that hung thick over Ashwood. The bells, usually so loud, were silent. A small search party decided to investigate the church, thinking they'd find some logical explanation. They arrived at dawn, clutching lanterns, stepping quietly into the shadowed entrance. Inside, they found the church undisturbed, pews lined neatly, candles still burning faintly in their holders, but the air was thick with dust, as if the place had been abandoned for years. Then, they noticed the bells. The ropes were frayed, barely hanging on, and the bells themselves had darkened, covered in a strange, shimmering residue that gleamed faintly in the dim light. One man reached out, brushing his hand against it, only to pull back with a shout. His hand was ice cold, and his skin had turned a sickly shade of gray. Whatever was on those bells, it was spreading. By the following day, word of the church spread, and fear gripped the town, but it was too late. The sickness had already started to take its toll. People became sluggish, whispering to themselves, avoiding each other's gaze, mumbling about shadows they saw flittering in their periphery. And the bells, they resumed their strange, erratic ringing, this time growing louder, echoing through town, carrying a feeling of dread that seeped into every home. By the end of the week, the town square stood empty. No one knows exactly when Ashwood was abandoned, but when investigators arrived, they found only silence. Homes stood empty, tables set with dishes still holding half-eaten meals, beds left unmade, windows wide open to the cool autumn air. But the church was locked tight, the door bound with chains and covered in strange symbols, as if someone had tried to seal something in. The investigators found a single note on the altar, scribbled hastily on a piece of paper. We tried to lock it away. Do not ring the bells. Locals say if you stand on the edge of Ashwood on a quiet evening, you can still hear the faint tolling of bells, echoing from the empty church, a warning that no one dares to ignore, for the curse of Ashwood's bells linger, and those that hear them are said to vanish without a trace, leaving only an echo in the silence. Briar's Ridge was a ghost of its former self. Once a bustling mining town nestled in the Rockies, it had been all but forgotten after the mine closed. Locals stuck around, but their numbers dwindled with every passing year. By the fall of 1983, the town was barely alive, but that October, something new arrived in Briar's Ridge. a thick, black fog, silent as death and twice as unsettling. The fog swept in one evening without warning. It wasn't the usual mountain mist, light and airy. This fog was dense, oily, clinging to the ground in tendrils that snaked between houses, leaving a dark, damp residue. It blanketed the town, stifling sound, and casting the whole place in an unnatural silence. By morning, 3 people were missing. Their doors were locked from the inside, their beds untouched. It was as if they had simply been plucked out of their lives, leaving only a ghostly trace of their presence. Sheriff Earl Thatcher, a tough, no-nonsense man who'd lived in Briar's Ridge his whole life, was determined to find them. He had heard the old stories about shadows in the mountains, rumors of men vanishing near the mines, but he never put much stock in them, until now. Earl decided to track the fog. The locals had seen it move up the mountainside towards Barker Mine, an old, abandoned shaft people called the Pit to Nowhere. Some people said the mine was cursed, a place that had claimed more than its fair share of lives back in the day. Earl knew it was just a place of death, pure and simple, and he wasn't one to be spooked by stories. But there was something about that fog, how it seemed to pulse and shift, like it was alive. And there was something else, too, a faint whispering hum that grew louder as he and his deputy, Sam, trudged up the rocky trail. They arrived at the mine entrance as the sun began to set. The fog had pooled at the entrance, thicker than anywhere else, churning like a dark sea. Earl hesitated, shining his flashlight into the blackness, but the beam barely cut through the fog. And then he saw it, a figure standing just inside the entrance, half hidden by the fog. The figure wore a miner's uniform, the kind from decades ago, with dirt and grime streaked across his face. But it was the eyes that made Earl's blood run cold. They glowed a deep, hellish red, like embers. Earl's hand shook as he took a step back, but it was too late. The fog surged forward, engulfing him in an instant. His deputy watched, frozen in horror, as Earl disappeared into the mist, his screams echoing out from the mine, growing faint, distorted, until it was gone. Back in town, people started locking their doors as the sun went down, terrified of what might come next. That night, Earl's voice drifted down from the mountains, faint but clear, calling out for help. Some townsfolk tried to follow the sound, but the fog turned hostile, pushing them back with an almost physical force. The following morning, Earl was gone. The fog, however, remained, and with it, the whispers of the missing. The fog seemed to move with purpose now, winding through streets, slipping under doors. People heard voices, faintly, calling out from within the mist. The voices sounded twisted, pleading, like they were coming from miles underground. Those brave enough to listen said the voices were familiar. Friends, neighbors, even the voice of Earl. Within days, Briar's Ridge was empty. Only a few things were left behind. Open doors swinging in the wind, soot-streaked windows, and an impressive silence. Months later, investigators arrived to find a town frozen in time, eerily untouched, as if its residents had simply walked out one night and never returned. They searched the mine and found nothing but shadows and silence, the place so unnaturally cold it made their breath mist. Even now, people say that if you stand on the mountain trail at night, you can hear them, the voices of Briar Ridge, calling out for help, echoing through the valley like a ghostly refrain. And if you stand too close, some say the fog will reach for you, pulling you in, dragging you to the depths where the souls of Briar Ridge are still trapped, lost in the endless black mist, forever calling out for escape. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our page to stay updated. Stay vigilant. The unknown is always closer than you think.